Hello and welcome. I was like, what day is it today? But I remember it's Thursday. That's why I put it on the slide, Gabriella. We're just going to give people a few minutes to get in. I don't know why this week has felt so long. It was my son's 14th birthday yesterday.
Aw.
So, we had family over last night. We had a big dinner. And so those midweek celebrations, as much as you love to celebrate your family, can be a lot of work after a busy day. But we've had a ton of interest in this session. I'm going to introduce Gabriella in a minute. So I'll just kick us off. Gabrielle, I have so many questions about this topic, so I can only imagine how many questions everyone here has. Just a little housekeeping. Number one, yes, I get asked this question all the time. Wait, before I do that, if you can put in the chat where you're coming from, I do always ask this question and I do always want to know, but today it's even more important. We'd love to know where you're coming from because we're going to be talking about it from this topic from the context of you're from not a US citizen and you're crossing the border, and you are a US citizen and you're crossing back. So Gabrielle, you might want to take a quick look at the chat to see where people are coming to us from.
All over Canada. This is awesome.
Wow. Amazing.
And
amazing.
US. And the West
Yeah,
Coast.
we had a lot of registrants from both sides of the US and Canadian border. I noticed that. And we're very happy you're here, but we are recording the session. I won't forget my housekeeping. And number two is that Gabriella is going to be giving you her perspective. This is not to be considered legal advice. If you want legal advice specific to your business, Gabriella, you might want to put your email in now because I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in connecting with you. So Gabriella will put her email. It will be up in this presentation, but that's when you get official legal advice. So I wanted to say that as housekeeping. The third thing is we're excited for your questions. There is Q&A feature. If you really can't find it, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. It is better if they go on the Q&A page. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. Sometimes we get like amazing questions, but they're quite long and detailed. Those can be hard to address during the session. So maybe if you ask a question, if you can make it shorter so that it'll be easier for us just to address. I just want to try to cover as many of your questions as possible. We totally love to have them. And I get that details can be really, really important. But it's not, as you can imagine, Gabrielle and I are trying to present and look at your questions at the same time. But I wanted to start with something more fun, happy. Cherry blossom season. So cherry blossoms occur on both sides of the border. So I thought this is one way that we can be brought together. I don't know if anyone's had the chance to go out and see some cherry blossoms in bloom. We've got a few in our neighborhood. So I found this photo and I thought it would be great. A little bit of new news from First 30. We're launching our employee onboarding course this month, which I am super excited about. So I'll tell you more about that in some notes to follow. But if you're refreshing or revamping your employee onboarding program, this is a step-by-step. So you can have a look out for that. And I'm actually having a meeting later today about a technology, our onboarding buddy platform that we will be launching soon. I don't want to commit to a date. It's ready to go, but it doesn't look great yet. So I want to make it a great experience for all of our clients. And it just really answers all the questions for a new hire about your business. So it can be a really great tool. And I really like this for HR because you get asked so many questions again and again and again. And this can be a little help for people with you as well. So you don't spend all your time doing that. And of course, we still run our fantastic outplacement program with great results. I always say our pricing is the best. Don't work with us because of that, though. Work with us because we really deliver the best results, and we have such a high success rate getting people who have been impacted by layoffs back to work. So I'll send you more information on all of that, but I would really like now to introduce Gabriella. All of you, a lot of you, I shouldn't say all of you, because we do have some new participants, so welcome to you. But Gabriella knows Nina Gupta, so if anyone's come to her, I'm not cheating on Nina by running a session with Gabriella. But Gabriella and I met a few weeks ago and we just really hit it off. You're amazing, Gabriella. It's going to be a fun session. And she's also so knowledgeable. Gabriella, is there anything else you wanted to tell us about the firm you work for yourself before we get started?
Well, I think the most important thing, and thank you for having me here, Amy. It's an
Oh,
honor
it's
to
our,
be here. And
oh,
yes,
my
Nina's the
pleasure.
best, and I'm honored to be sitting in her chair right now. So, the thing that's important. So I work for Berardi Immigration Law, and our office is right in Buffalo, New York. So we're right along the U.S.-Canadian border. We help primarily Canadian citizens, primarily Canadian business people, though we do some family stuff. But we help business people figure out a way to come here. And we spend a lot of our time advising companies and individuals on how to make those transitions happen. And because of our proximity to the border, our finger is very much on the pulse of what's been happening. So I'm really excited to be here today to kind of set the record straight and help everybody get a little bit of breathing room from everything they've been hearing about in the last couple months.
And you're going to hear and this is why I'm so glad we're running the session, because you hear a lot of like anecdotes and you hear little pieces, but it's like, what is really happening? So this is going to be fantastic. Do you want me to change the slide?
Sure, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay.
So, these are some things that people want to talk about this all day, every day, and I get it. And I want to validate people's feelings. If they're feeling anxiety or nervousness or confusion about what's happening at the border, I understand why you're feeling that way because of what we're hearing in the media. But the most important thing, you guys, 1 million people come in and out of this country every day. And we might be hearing about one anecdotal experience or another, on a weekly basis of what's happening at the border. But I can tell you, as a lawyer who has been practicing for over a decade here in Buffalo, New York, what is happening is not new, it is newsworthy. And that's not to gaslight anybody and to make them feel like they're not right to be feeling nervous. It's always been a nerve-wracking experience across the border, no matter what country you're going into. But the important thing to keep in mind is we don't know what's on the government's computers. Assume they know everything about you when you're trying to come into the country. And when we're hearing these stories about, oh, well, this Canadian woman was detained and then this happened to this person, and we don't know that person's immigration history. We don't know that person's criminal history. There's a lot that the media is not privy to that the government knows about these people. So try to just take a breath and realize that if you're somebody who has no criminal history, you have no immigration violations, your social media history is not so inflammatory that the government can view what you've been doing as supporting terrorism or inciting crazy hate or violence in the United States, chances are, guys, you're gonna be fine. Okay? So stay calm. All right. Why are we hearing about this now? Well, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, the people who sit right at the border, they have very, very wide discretion, and they've always practiced that discretion. But right now, there is this mandate coming up from high of national security, national security, national security. We got to secure our borders. We've got to keep everybody safe. So these officers are feeling more empowered to maybe dig a little bit deeper, ask a few more questions. And yes, that may be happening. But I could tell you, as a lawyer here in Buffalo, New York, my clients are still getting their work permits approved at the border every day. My green card holders are able to return to the United States without issue. My commuters who are coming here to work for corporations in Buffalo, they're reporting smooth entries. Really, guys, I'm not trying to gaslight, but it is business as usual for us here. Okay. Now,
And I'm so glad you said that, because as someone who follows a lot of news media, it doesn't feel that way, right? And if people have anxiety or they're worried, like HR folks are worried about their colleagues crossing the border because they're taking some responsibility to help them get over the border, I think this is really good information, because yes, you do. I think part of what the news media's job is to kind of make us watch.
yes.
So
yes.
they're always going to the extremes, right? So it does seem scary, and it makes me nervous too.
Yeah. And what we're hearing a lot is this last topic I have on here of, what about my electronics? What about my cell phone? And we will be touching into that further. So you could keep moving to the next slide.
Sure. I'm not the best slide driver, by the way, Gabriella. So I guess I should have told you that before I agreed to drive.
Hey, girl, we're all doing the best we can. No worries, no worries. So, before we get into the specifics of electronics, as a business immigration lawyer, one of the big questions we get all the time are, what should I be doing at the border? And I'm nervous. I don't know what to bring. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. The important thing is, when you are coming to the United States as a visitor, there are two forms of evidence you should always have on you. Okay. And this is going to sound crazy what I'm about to say, but if you want to have a less stressful entry to the United States and you want to feel more empowered, when you're trying to interface with CBP, there's two types of evidence you should have. Number one, get an old-fashioned folder like we used to have in school. One side of the folder, I want you to print out all the evidence of your enduring ties to your home country. Your recent utility bills, your recent
Oh.
tax document, to a couple of recent pay stubs. If you have a lease or a mortgage document, I know you're gonna be like, this is nuts. I've never needed this when I've crossed the border before, but this will make you feel empowered. And God forbid you have a question at the border, you could say, oh, thank God I have all of this evidence on me if the government is scrutinizing my entry. So that's one side.
Yeah. Can I ask one question as you're talking about that? So that makes a lot of sense, but I remember once I crossed the border with my, and this is going to be a little anecdote from Amy, but I once just happened to have my birth certificate with all
Yeah,
of my
yeah,
documentation. And they actually said to me, like, it was a problem. Like, why do you have your birth certificate? So I'm going to just ask, I think this might be going through the minds of people. That to me, it just feels like over preparedness. Like,
yes,
I'm doing this to compensate for something I have to hide. So if
yes.
someone is say we had to, we're in a position to present these documents and someone asks the question, Amy, why did you feel the need to do this, all of this? What would be a sufficient answer in your experience?
I would say that I have been advised that as an entrant to the United States, it's my responsibility to overcome any presumptions that you, the officer, have of what my intention is. Because really, and I
Okay.
would say this part to the lawyer, to the officer, but every CBP officer in this country is trained to believe you are lying, and they are trained to believe that you have immigrant intent. So it's the burden of proof is on us to show that the nature of our intentions is as stated, which is
Hmm.
why I am recommending that on one side of the folder, you have proof. Look, I have a place to go home to, just so you trust my story that I'm coming here as a visitor. But moreover, here I have this proof of what I'm doing in the United States. So if you're going to a conference, here's my ticket to the conference. If you're going to a business lunch, here's my email itinerary saying I'm going to be meeting you at this restaurant at 12 p.m. Here's my round trip ticket and my proof of my hotel stay, just so you know I'm being truthful. My story matches my stuff.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's good to know because sometimes companies, like, I don't know how many people we have that are small business owners on here or that have employees that might be going over the border, even to give talks. I've been in that
Mhm.
situation before. And people have said, oh, giving a talk, you might not get accepted if it looks like you're getting paid to go over the
Mhm.
border.
That's true. That's true.
Okay.
So it's good
Okay.
to have your ducks in a row. Make sure, and
Okay.
I'm not telling you to show up and being like, hello, sir, here's all my paperwork, please. But rather just have them tucked away just in case. Present
So
only if needed.
And so in this situation, I think that it would be great for the HR leaders that are joining us today. They can think about giving this advice to their
Mhm.
employees who they are responsible to coach on or consult on how to cross the
Yep.
border. So this would be maybe it would be a really good idea to even put together a little information pack for your employees that are crossing over the border. What documents should you take?
Yep.
Here is how to answer some common questions at the border, those sorts of things. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's something you do for your clients, Gabriella. It doesn't sound like it. I'm not sure it would be, but this is something HR folks can certainly do for their
Yeah, yeah.
colleagues.
And one of the things that HR can do that's most powerful is to provide a HR letter, a letter coming from them
Mm.
explaining that so-and-so is going to the United States from X date to Y date, and they are going to be staying at this hotel. The purpose of their travel is to attend this event. And during the duration of this person's stay, at all times, they will be continue to be paid by a Canadian organization or Canadian entity. They will be here only for a temporary period. They will not be performing any hands-on work in the United States. Now, in a minute, guys, we'll have a conversation about when you know you actually need a work permit, when you actually need a work visa. But for the purposes of that letter, that's very powerful to say, look, a company is on board with what this person is doing, and they're going out and representing that this person has the right intentions for their stay in the United States as a visitor.
Yeah. I think the biggest mistake people could make is really like I know not knowing where you're going to be staying to. As you said, make sure you know where you're going to be staying.
Mhm.
And they actually want the address. That did come as a surprise to me. I had to once look up my hotel, the address of my hotel as well for
Yes,
the,
yes,
yeah,
that is
yeah, at the
something that
border.
they ask. And just like how they said to you that comment about why do you have your birth certificate on you? It's not uncommon for them to try to trip you up, to try to
I see.
see
Okay.
if your story really is accurate.
Right. Okay. Because a lot of times what happens is people have things on their phone and things can get very hard to find when you're under pressure. I don't think we should take away the fact that it's nerve-wracking to be questioned by an
Mhm,
authority. So
mhm.
if you have electronic information, make sure that it's organized. I'm sorry, I'm giving the advice now. I'm shouldn't be good.
Okay,
I'm just trying to think like what does it feel like? But
yeah.
one thing that has helped me, I will say, is to have all my electronic information organized.
Mhm.
And someone is putting Edmond, sorry, I'm having trouble reading today. I need to get better glasses, but sorry, Edmondo mentioned having your hotel reservation printed
Printed,
just in case, or
totally.
just on your phone, but you know where it is because you know what it feels like standing there and you're trying to find everything and then your internet isn't working and you can't get what you need. So
Totally,
knowing where it is and having it
for
organized is
sure,
probably a good idea.
for sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we can go to the next slide.
Sure. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A yet, so feel free to put, yeah, and I just want to mention one more thing that Edmundo said here is make sure you have your battery fully charged for your devices, if that's where you have your information, because that
Yeah.
can be risky too,
Yeah, yeah, and
right?
that's why another vote for, like, at work, I do everything electronically. I put petitions together in Adobe, I do everything online, but when it comes to travel, I'm an old-fashioned nerd. I have everything printed, have it ready to go because traveling is just so nerve-wracking. So,
Yeah,
yes,
it really
Rachel,
can
I'm with
be
you
for
on that
sure.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So here are two topics here that HR wants to talk about a lot because they're super important points here. Number one, we've been hearing about electronic border searches. How the heck are we supposed to be advising our people about crossing the border when they have their laptops, when they have smartphones? The other question that through the sands of time we always get is, I have somebody that goes to the United States with some degree of regularity. I'm not sure, do they need a work permit or do they not? So we're going to get into that. So first, I think we're starting, if you want to go to the next slide,
sure.
with electronics question. Okay, so here's the really crazy thing. In the United States, we have by our Constitution a right against unreasonable searches and seizures. But guess what? The Supreme Court has ruled, sorry, my friends, national security comes first. And they greatly relaxed the rules around privacy at the border. So if all of that to say, if an officer asks you for your phone, you could say no, but they can detain your phone.
Hmm.
The best thing you can do when you are traveling is put your phone in airplane mode. And why is that? Because when an officer asks for your phone, which by the way, in the year 2024, less than 0.1% of all travelers were asked to see their electronics. Unfortunately, we don't know the data for this year since the info just comes out at the end of the year. I suspect it's going to be a little bit higher, but probably not substantially higher. Anyway, first of all, there's no business privilege that exists. So an officer can open up your phone, and if you have your Gmail app right there, or your Apple email app right open, or whatever, they have the right to look through your emails to see what you're doing, okay? They have a right to look through your pictures. They have a right to look through your social media. But there is one exception. They cannot look at remotely stored or cloud-based data. Okay, so by putting your phone on airplane mode, you are restricting the officers from accessing anything remotely other than what's right there on the phone. Okay.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Gabriella, and I do see there's a question in the chat. We'll come in the Q&A. I'll definitely come back to your Q&A as well. My question is this: if you have a passcode, if your phone is locked, what does that mean? Because if I have because some people have, most of us now do have a lock on our phone.
Yep.
So if we hand it over, because they might say, well, we need your passcode. Then what happens?
They can ask for it. And if you say no, they can detain the phone, which will delay your travel and could potentially preclude your ability to enter the United States.
Okay.
I know. It seems crazy, right? It seems crazy.
It's like all of these things, I can imagine so much changed after 9/11. And then, but now it's like a really different scenario where these things, and every individual you're going to meet at border crossing is going to be different and have a different take on the situation, a different read on you, whatever it is.
You're so right. And that goes back to that concept that these guys at the border and ladies at the border have very broad discretion to make a determination on whether a traveler should be trusted. So what are some things that corporations are doing? Well, some of them are putting full holds on travel to the United States, or at least non-essential travel to the United States. They are ensuring that any proprietary or confidential information is securely placed on the cloud. I've heard of some cases where they are wiping hard drives completely clean, or they're telling someone, you got to travel with a burner phone. But that also can beg the question. If to play devil's advocate here, an officer could say, why are you traveling with a burner phone? What do you have to hide? And that can also open up a can of worms for you. So it's a little bit of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But again, it's super important to keep in mind. The vast majority of travelers are never going to be asked to have their phones searched. So be smart about it. Don't have a picture of you doing drugs on your phone. Don't put a ton of information saved in your screenshots about, anti-Trump rhetoric, because it's certainly out there. Don't try to just be smart. We're all adults here. Let your phone be a mature reaction to who you are.
Gabriella, on that, and then I'm going to get to a few questions from our Q&A, if you don't mind. On the question about phones and, some people might be sitting on this call thinking, oh my gosh, well, number one, I don't know what my employees have on their phone. They could have this, they could have the type of content you're describing. They could have engaged with content in their history that is maybe considered more like left of center. So that would be one of these situations. Now, if you have history you're going to have a history on your phone. What should you do then before you cross the border? Should you delete your history? Is that actually going to help? I know that when they do, I watch Dateline, so I know that they can go back and look, but what can someone see if they see your phone at the border?
Yeah. They can. They can look at recently deleted stuff.
Okay.
Again, this is not legal advice. And even to my own clients, I would not ethically say this, I'm not going to tell you to delete that stuff off your phone, but that is something that some people may do. And that's one of the things where, again, unless you have some murky immigration history, unless you have criminal history, unless you've been spending way too much time in the US, unless you have extremely active social media, chances are you're going to be fine.
And I would add, I mean, you might find this, so you tell me if I'm right or wrong, if you're hostile when you get to the
Totally, Amy.
yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
I always tell everybody, be a sweet pea when you cross the border. Be polite, smile, and another thing, and I myself am not great about this, I'm a talker. Cut out the word vomit.
Yeah.
Answer only the questions that are asked. If it's
Yeah.
awkward, let it be awkward. If they have extra questions, they can ask you to clarify. If you feel you've
Yep.
answered the question, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we do have a question here asking if you can elaborate on the requirements of staying more than a month in the US if you're not
Yes,
a citizen.
yes. So let's talk about that. I will just quickly answer the other two just so we can get past
Sure. Yeah.
section right here. Is there a template work travel letter that can be shared? Yes, yes, and there's a lot of templates online already. But I can certainly provide Amy with a template of like the layout of what I typically advise my clients to include. Another anonymous attendee asked if you're signed out of emails or apps, will they force you to sign in? If those they can, if there are apps, they can ask you to go in. If the emails are all on the cloud, they can't ask you to go in. And
Do they do most border agents have a very good grasp of electronics, like
well,
enough that they know how to do all of these like things that the average person wouldn't know how to do?
they're all supposed to have mandatory training on the appropriate search and seizure of electronics. And I think, don't quote me, but I think it's actually an annual training that they have to take part of for that.
Yeah.
You might have heard the story of an actual lawyer, a US citizen that was coming into the United States who happened to have represented one of the students who protested, I think at the University of Michigan, and was arrested last year. He was representing that person. And he was coming back with his family. His wife and his kids came in, but he was stopped. His phone was detained. And luckily, because he was a lawyer, he said, no, absolutely, I refuse to do that. I'm not giving it to you. They did take his phone for a while, but eventually they let him pass, but only after they let him see he let them see his contact list, and
Hmm.
only after he shared the things that they were able to prove to him are essential to know for his admission to the United States. They were fishing for information about this particular client. And you know, that was a dicey experience that that person had. Um,
Mhm.
So, but lawyer patient or lawyer client confidentiality is a little bit different. There's only so much
Mhm.
they're actually able to look at in our communications.
Right.
Okay, so requirements of staying more than a month. Some of you might have heard that there's a new registration requirement for anybody who's in the United States for more than a month and has not registered their status. It just so happened that Canadian snowbirds got caught up in this. And in my own view, it was never the intention of them to find the folks over 65 who pay taxes in South Florida and aren't working. They just happened to be caught up in this situation because when folks come from Canada and they're driving to Florida or wherever they're wintering, they are just waved through the border. They are
Right.
not given an official admission record. Okay. The real purpose of what this administration is doing with this registration requirement is to try to criminalize being in this country out of status or illegally. That's what this is all about. But most people who are admitted to the United States will never need to register. If you're here on a work permit, if you're here on a green card, if you're here, as a visitor who flew in, you don't need to register because the government already has a record of your entry. It's only for those folks who are here illegally, who are here out of status, and who were not granted official admission stamp. And the way that you can register, you have to create a my.uscis.gov account on the government's portal. No, you should not register prior to leaving. You register once you've been here 30 days. That was another question.
Oh,
And you register online at the government's portal by filling out Form G325R. Once, if you are a Canadian citizen, if you register, you will eventually be given a notice, a proof of your registration. You carry that on your person at all times thereafter. If you're not a Canadian citizen, you will also be required to attend a biometrics appointment at some point in the future. Now, this is all being rolled out. It became effective a few weeks ago. So like anything, it's a, trial. And we'll just have to see how it goes for the government.
Gabrielle, I just want to tell you something fun, share something funny so I have done a lot of travel in North America, in Europe specifically. I lived in England for 6 years and
Oh,
traveled all
cool.
over there. Do you know the hardest place where I had trouble crossing the border? Canada. Canada.
Yeah.
I found it, the grilling that I would get.
Coming back
And
was bad.
coming back was worse. And I remember them saying to me once, "Why are you even here?" And I'm like, "Well, I was born here and I'm a citizen." But that's when I was
Yeah.
as sweet as can be.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
love the country I was
Yeah.
born in and I
Yeah.
want to see my
Yeah.
family. But I know this isn't what the session is about. I don't know if people can relate on this or it's just me. I don't know. But the Canadian border, I found I got a lot more grilling than I ever did crossing any other border,
Yeah.
which I find really, really
Yeah.
interesting. I don't know if anyone's had that experience.
I have had people have that experience, and a lot of people think it's because they're taking a lesson from the United States playbook.
Huh.
Their friends on just the other side of the border are doing that, they're doing that.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
who knows? Who knows? And
Yeah, but
again,
that's been for years I've had that experience and I've never understood why. I'm glad
exactly.
everybody's doing, look, I'm glad everyone's doing their job, no
Yeah,
question. It was
of
just really
course.
interesting
Yeah,
that that
like
was the
good
hardest
old
one for me
me.
to,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know. I know. I know. I see is okay, real ID. Let's get to that in a second. Chloe asks, does it make a difference whether someone is driving or crossing the border or to cross the border or flying? Are you more likely to be questioned further when driving? That's a great question. Okay, just checking the time here.
We're
If
good.
if you have, it depends on the purpose of your travel, depends on what you're traveling with, what kind of stuff do you have on your person. If you're just a regular old tourist, you should be fine no matter what. Although I'll tell you, there are some ports of entry we say stay the heck away from. There are others we say are pretty good. Here in Buffalo, the Port of Buffalo is pretty good. So Peace Bridge is the one that we recommend the most. The Peace Bridge sees the most passenger and commercial traffic of any port of entry along the entire northern border. So usually they have enough trained officers on premise to be able to effectively admit people to the US. I'll tell you, Windsor, Detroit area, I'd say avoid if you can.
Mhm.
Near Montreal, they're pretty good over there. Ottawa, they're pretty good over there. And most Class A, most pre-clearance locations. So the really cool thing, some of you guys may not know this, but it's very rare that a country has US Customs and Border Protection sitting in an airport in another country the way it is in Canada. You clear customs in Canada, you clear US Customs in Canada before you leave. When you're at Pearson, when you're at Trudeau, when you're in Vancouver, all the big airports across the country. And what some people feel better about traveling these days out of those ports of entry is you can't be detained in your own country. But again, do I think that's necessary to think that way? No, I don't. Pearson has been spotty, with some officers can be a little bit aggressive when our clients are applying for work permits. But again, if you guys are just traveling for pleasure or traveling as a business visitor and you don't need a work permit, which we'll discuss shortly, you should not be stressed about what's better, land or airport of entry.
Well, Gabrielle, I'm so glad you brought that up about having the border control on the Canadian side of the border when you're doing so, because it's also about how people feel. And if you have employees who are traveling and they're clearly very nervous. Maybe they've had a bad experience before. Maybe they are, looking at media that is making them nervous. It
Yeah,
is a nice way for them to feel real reassured,
yes,
and they can have you so close to
yes,
contact if they need something.
yes. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
true. That's true. I see, I want to answer the question about real ID cards real quickly. There's a new requirement in the United States that after May 7th, yesterday, anybody who's traveling domestically within the United States needs to have either a real ID, which is an optimized driver's license or identification card, or they need to have another qualifying document. There are so many other qualifying documents. I use Nexus. You could use Global Entry. You can use a passport, foreign or US. It's not specific just to, it's basically if you're a US citizen in the United States and you don't have a passport, you don't have a Nexus, you don't have a military ID or some other forms of identification, you need a real ID. I wouldn't let it bother you. If you have a Nexus or a passport, you'll be fine. An enhanced driver's license is another thing in the United States that you can use. I've heard people have been asked what they think of the president at the border. These guys at the border, I swear. How do
Well,
we
we did hear there was recently, to give that context, Gabriella, there was a recent news story about a man and his wife who were traveling together, and he was asked, and she made a flippant comment just I think she was just trying to be funny, and they were then apparently, again, I didn't write the story or do the research for it, but they were banned from the US for 6 years or something because she made a joke.
Yeah. So again, one of the most frustrating parts of immigration law is the unfettered discretion of these officers at the border. And the guys at the border are not always the top brats. You know what I'm saying? So they're given this discretion, and if their job is to keep the United States safe, they can interpret that very broadly. Um, I would probably say it's not my country. It's not really my place to have an opinion on it.
That's a great
Um,
answer.
but if they pressed and wanted you to say that, you could say, well, I may or may not agree with some of his policies, but I keep that to myself. And I think that you'll probably be fine thereafter.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, now we have another question, but maybe we should save that one until, well, after we continue our next few
Sure.
slides. Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, here's the big question for all the HR and the employers out there. I got someone who's traveling to the United States a lot. When do I know it's time for a work permit? Well, first of all, you'll know it's time for a work permit if you could get told by an officer at the border you need a work permit. But up to that point in time, I always tell my clients, number one, Canadians think, well, I could stay here for at least 6 months. What's the big deal? I could do whatever I want. Not that simple. The government says, yes, technically you could come as a visitor for 6 months a year. But if you are working in the United States during those 6 months, even if you're opening up a laptop and you are remoting in to a foreign employer that pays you in foreign currency, there's no digital nomad visa in the United States. That's the first important thing you have to know. It's mind-numbingly dumb because if you're not taking a job away from a US citizen and you're getting paid by a foreign company, who the heck cares? Well, it turns out the United States government does. You need a work permit for anything, any hands-on work you're doing in the US. Okay, but what about the situation of I have a Canadian executive that needs to go in for business meetings. He needs to go 2 times a month, and he usually stays for a day or two at a time. So there are certain activities that are permitted under the immigration laws as business visitors. You can go to meetings, you do trade shows, you could attend conferences, you could negotiate contracts, you could take people out to lunch, whatever you want to do. However, once your activity rises to the level of performing any kinds of day-to-day hands-on kind of work, and you are performing any kind of management activities in the United States, or you have direct reports who are reporting to you directly in the United States, you're putting yourself in hot water. And we have to temper your activities of what you're doing in the United States with the frequency and duration of your travels to the United States. The two are going to go hand in hand. So if you're an executive with 10 direct reports in the United States, but you only need to go there 2 days a year, I'm not going to worry about you. But if you have 1 or 2 direct reports in the United States and you need to go once or twice a month, it gets to a certain point where the government will say, you're traveling so frequently that we don't care or we don't trust what you say that you're doing in the United States. It's too often. You have too much responsibility in the US. You need a work permit. And people can, skate by for months or years and think that they're totally fine until the hammer drops and they learn the hard way. And that's how a lot of people come to me. So those are all the things that you need to keep in mind when making a determination. Okay, about a work permit. What if a Canadian consultant goes to their US client and obviously does work there? Should they be securing a work permit? Yes, 100%, absolutely. They're performing hands-on work in the US, they need a work permit. What about training? Great question. Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to ask a question because I'm just assuming that very few of us who are on this call today have ever been turned away at the border and had to return home.
Yeah.
So my question is like, what happens then? So I'm in a situation, like I had a plan, right? I'm going to a hotel, I'm going to my work. Like, no, I'm not asking about what to do about your work plan. That's up to the individual. But now what happens? You're stuck in the US, you're just sitting in limbo. Do you have to book a flight to get back? Like, what do you do next?
So you're talking from the perspective of, well, first of all, if you're at a Canadian pre-clearance location, which most Canadians are flying out of, you're not going to be placed, you're going to withdraw your application for admission and just go home.
You'll go home. Yeah. But if you're it's always going to be the case that if you're flying in, you're not going to be in an airport turning around and having to fly back home.
So, right. Well, there are some, like Billy Bishop Airport in Toronto, you can fly, there is no pre-clearance there, though that is changing soon. You could fly into Newark and then and do CBP in Newark and have yourself in that exact situation. At that point in time, they will most likely just put you on a plane back.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like it's a logistical question, but it's something that employees might have. Like,
totally.
If I've been traveling, like, what am I going to do? I'm flying from Billy Bishop into Newark and they're telling me I need to turn around. What do I do next? Right?
Yeah, it's true. The question about, and I know there's a question about the TN visa application. I promise you I will answer that question. But the question about training, if we need to send employees for hands-on training down in the US, they aren't working, but training, is this considered work? Training is such a gray area because the business visitor regulations do say that training is okay. But then again, we have to temper this with, do you need to bring a lot of tools? Do you need to bring a lot of software with you that could potentially make an officer ask questions about what do you need that for? What are you actually doing? How often and for how long are they going to be in the United States? Who is paying them? All of these things will be taken into consideration on a case-by-case basis. What an HR professional traveling to the United States to conduct interviews for a new US office, is that considered day-to-day work in the US? It absolutely can be. Can be looked at as managerial duties that you're doing in the United States. But again, we're going to temper this with how often are you having to go into the United States to do this. As a follow-up to Amy's questions on logistics, if someone has been denied entry and made to turn around, are they red flagged for future? Absolutely, they could be. So there could be a note on their file that the government says, next time this person comes in, pay particularly close attention to what they say they are going to do. Are they applying for the same work visa category that maybe they were applying for the first time? Or if they were coming in as a visitor, how soon after the last denied entry are they seeking re-entry to the United States? Has their story changed? What's the exact situation? All of these things can be taken into consideration. Amy, what's the next slide? I want to answer this last question, but This is why I was.
And we're at 1:44, so we have 15 more minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, this is great. Okay, um, so the question is, can an employer create a TN visa application package for employees if required? Or does it have to be a lawyer? No, it does not have to be a lawyer. You just have to make sure you're preparing it correctly, the way a lawyer would know how to create
Sorry,
it.
can you just, what's the acronym for TN?
Yes, we're going to talk about it now.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
what are the most popular visa categories for Canadians who are seeking entry to the United States? Or really, aside from TNs, anybody in the world who are seeking a work visa in the United States. TN is the one we see most commonly. It stands for Trade NAFTA because it was created under the NAFTA agreement, now the USMCA, which turns out doesn't just prescribe the movement of goods across borders, but also the movement of people. And if you are in one of about 60 to 70 different occupational categories, you have a job offer in one of those categories with a US company, you have the appropriate credentials as prescribed by NAFTA to work in that category, you can apply right at the Canadian border, or Mexicans can do it too at a consulate, for a work permit. And there's a lot of confusion about what you actually need to apply for a work permit. But at the baseline, you want a letter from an employer confirming what the person's going to be doing, what their credentials are, where they're going to be working, and for how long, and what are they getting paid. We do these a lot for software developers and engineers and accountants and lawyers and the typical professions standard professions. Another one we see, and this is what's probably going to be most applicable to the folks on this call, is something called the L1 Intercompany Transferee Visa. This is for individuals who have been employed for at least 1 year out of the last 3 years for a company outside the United States, who need to enter the United States on a temporary basis for as little or as much time as necessary to perform work on behalf of the US operations, or even on behalf of the Canadian operations, but in the United States on related business. These are for folks who have, managerial, executive, or specialized knowledge positions within a company. Then the next, the E2 visas, these are for your entrepreneurs, your people who are consultants, people who are, the E1 is called the treaty trader, and people are like, treaty trader, what the heck? Well, the E visas are only available to people who are citizens of countries that maintain treaties of friendship and commerce with the United States, Canada being one of them. E1s are for people who are involved in cross-border trade, international trade, and trade can be the movement of goods or services across borders. So a lot of my consultant clients, they consult with people in Canada, and so from time to time, they need to enter the United States to execute their contracts with US companies or US individuals as well. An E1 treaty trader would be a great fit for them. But then let's say you want to start or invest in an existing business in the United States. You can also get a visa as an E2 treaty investor. And essential employees of both E1 and E2 companies can also come in thereafter and perform any kind of work as necessary. And you can spend as little or as much time in the United States on each of those categories. That's a very high level overview, but those are the ones that you're going to see most often for Canadians.
Gabriella, is the next slide, we have some questions. Is the next slide your information? Because I'll just put that up.
I think it is.
I'm gonna leave that up while you're answering these questions, just so people can get in touch with you and take a look at your law firm's website or anything if they want. So I'll leave that to you now.
Okay, perfect. So I will just answer the rest of the questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Can someone cross the border for work at the US office of a Canadian company if they are with a colleague who is a US citizen or has a TN visa? This would be every 2 to 3 weeks or so. If they are with a colleague who is a US citizen or has a TN visa. Yeah, you are able to, if you need to come into the United States every 2 or 3 weeks, regardless of who you're with, you probably need a work visa. That's too frequent to be coming to the United States for the government not to have red flags be raised. But in and of itself, being with a US citizen doesn't change your situation. Unless you're unemployed and just coming in to be with your partner, I would say. Can a Canadian employee working under a Canadian employment contract while still living in Canada qualify for a TN visa without transitioning to a US employment contract if the employer has entities in both Canada and the United States? Yes, absolutely. There are ways to do that with a TN visa. You can also explore an L1. To be on an L1, you do not need a US employment contract. You do not need to be on the US payroll. You can stay on foreign payroll while continuing to come to the United States. Okay, my company invites our Canadian contractors to come to the US for a team building event every year. It's usually a 4-day event only. Nah, you don't need a work permit for this. You have evidence that you're coming in for a team building event. You're not getting paid by a US source. This is another situation where HR can draw a letter up. You have a round trip ticket, a hotel stay. You can very clearly evidence the purpose of your travels. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, is there an appeal process if we think we're unfairly denied crossing on how long?
That's a great question. I had that question as well, actually, in my mind. Yeah.
A great question, and one that we're always banging our heads against the wall about. And it changes administration to administration. It changes port of entry to port of entry. In the past, we've had luck submitting reconsideration applications to the chief of that port saying, hey, you guys made a bad call and this is why. And usually they say, okay, bring them back in and we'll do it again. These days, it's not always so easy. And it's something that often they'll say, you just need to come in again and try for a different result. And that's a pretty crappy system, if you ask me, because one CBP officer is not going to want to overturn what their brother did the day before. They're not going to want to step on anybody's toes. So it depends on the nature. Why was your case denied? Why was your entry denied? Is this based on a misunderstanding, or was there a material reason why it was your entry or your approval was denied? We'd have to look closer on that on a case-by-case basis. I realize we're focusing mostly on US and Canadian citizens, but do you have thoughts on any unique things we should think about for Australian and British employees visiting the States beyond what we've covered so far? Yes. First, for Australians, love an Australian, not just because they're wonderful people, but also because, did you know they have their own visa category carved out specifically for them? It's called an E3 visa. And basically, if your employee has at least a bachelor's, the equivalent of a US bachelor's degree, and it has a job offer with a company in the United States in a position that roughly requires that kind of education, you can get approved for an E3 visa directly on the spot at any kind of embassy or consulate, US embassy or consulate in Australia, and get a work permit, a 2-year work permit that can continue to be extended. So that's a great place to be. If you're not coming to work and you're coming to visit, you need to either use ESTA, which is the visa waiver program, or a visitor visa in order to enter the United States. And all other talking points are consistent with what I've said so far on that. British employees are a little bit more challenging. They don't have their own visa carved out for them. They have to apply for the good old H-1B, which is the worst visa category in US immigration. Well, it's the best, but it's the worst because it's governed by a lottery because everybody and their brother wants it. And there's 85,000 visa numbers for approximately 500,000 people who apply for them every year. So very low selection rates, but same concept with that. You have at least a bachelor's degree in a specific field. You have a job offer with a US company that in fact requires that kind of education. What is your advice? How are we doing on time here, Amy? I'm trying to go.
We've got 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes, and then we're going to have some things to wrap up. But yeah, well, you're doing great.
Okay. What about employees who are on a work visa in Canada from India and are not a PR, but they need to travel down to the US for meetings? Is there something we should be cautious of while sending employees down south? Yes, they need visitor visas in order to come to the United States. And right now in Canada and any other place in the world, it's taking months and months or potentially years to get visitor visas. So start that process ASAP if they don't already have one. Otherwise, same things apply. I have heard that e-visas are much more inconvenient to obtain at this time. Would it be better to explore either L1 or TN? Actually, I got to tell you, since the start of the Trump administration, we've had higher success levels with E's and E1s and E2s than TNs and Ls. Now, there's always going to be spotty applications of TNs and Ls at the border because, again, they're governed by CBP, who, as we said, may not be legal scholars fully all the time, and are just doing the best they can to make a decision on somebody's eligibility. What they want to be doing at the border is keeping them safe, not necessarily being arbiters of someone's work eligibility in the US. TNs and L1s are faster though, because you could apply at a border and get approved right on the spot. Es are governed by a little bit longer of an application process, but they're all great options and you should explore every single one of them. Es last for 5 years and that's why we prefer them though. Okay, I think we did it.
Whew. Good job. Excellent. Well, I think we really have to thank Nina for this introduction. I hope you all agree that Gabriella, you were amazing. I had so many questions, so thank you. And you answered them all. That was so great. And I learned so much from you. So thank you so much. So get in touch with Gabriella if you need support. You're welcome to connect with me or Gab. We have a lot of new folks today, but we have a lot. And Gabrielle was like, are you sure we're going to get questions at the beginning? And I'm like, I know this great, amazing group. We're going to get lots of questions. This is a fantastic topic. So connect with Gabriella on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. I'll send you a little, you're going to get a few emails from me over the next few days. Don't think that that's how we manage our mailing list though, because we invite you to events like this. So if you're new to it, you'll get a few follow-ups. You're going to get a message from me. You're going to get, I want to make sure I send Gabriella's template and you're going to get the replay. That is not the general frequency of the messages we send to our network. So please don't feel like we're going to be messaging you all the time just because you joined our mailing list. We are thinking of starting a Slack community because we just have such great conversations. Gabriella, you would be welcome in that Slack community as well. If you like that idea or you have any other ideas for First 30 where you think that we could really connect more as a network, please don't hesitate to reach out to me because I would love to hear your ideas. Sometimes we're just limited by our own what we know about. I thought Slack community would be a good one, but if you have any other ideas, please do let me know. I'm actually going to quickly add in the chat here a link to a session that I'm participating in next week. I have to tell you, I got a new computer and it's a Mac, and now I don't know how to use my PC anymore. Isn't that so sad? So as we're doing this, I'm going to try to get this link in, but there's a Thorpe Benefits event that I'm going to be on a panel for, and you are all invited. So I will send that, and the registration is free. So you can join that as well. So I'm going to just type the link in here too. We'll always let you know about any events coming up that you can participate in. And I think that sums it up. But Gabriella, again, just thank you so much for your time and your energy and your expertise for sharing that with this amazing group of people. And thank you to everyone for joining. I saw so many familiar faces. I don't always get a chance to call people out and say hi, but I really appreciate all of your great questions and everyone joining. Certainly if you have any other questions for Gabriella, you can reach out to her and maybe you want to work with her as well in the future.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for your questions, and I'm always here if you have any more. You guys take care.
Great. It just shows you how little I know how to use my old PC now that I moved to a new computer, because I just shut my camera off and didn't even know. But
okay.
Anyway, everyone have a great day. Thanks so much. I'm going to be awkward and take a few minutes to shut everything down. But yeah, have a really good one and good luck with all your border crossings.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. You'll all be great. Take care, guys.
Okay, see you later.